All right, so you shared this fascinating thing with us, this transcript of Glenn Kirshner explaining why he left MSNBC.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he was there for 6.5 years
Right.
as a legal analyst, but his background even goes deeper than that.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking 3 decades as a federal prosecutor.
Yeah.
Starting in the Army JAG Corps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was at the Department of Justice in D.C.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of experience, gives his decision some real weight, right?
For sure.
So what you're hoping to get out of this deep dive, as I understand it, is a clear picture of what drove this move, right?
Yeah.
And what it might tell us about how the media is doing these days,
Right.
Especially when it comes to all the really sensitive political stuff that's going on.
Absolutely.
And we've got his own words straight from his YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So let's jump in and see what we can learn here.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the things that really jumps out right away
Yeah.
is Kirshner's opening statement.
Mm-hmm.
He says his aim is to stop preaching to the converted
Yeah.
and instead focus on talking and listening across the great divide, right? That really sets the stage for what he's doing here,
Right from the start.
And then he asks these questions that I think a lot of us have been thinking about too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, was I making a positive contribution to what he sees as the rule of law kind of going away?
Mm-hmm.
And then even more personally, he's asking himself, was I actually reaching people who think differently than me, like conservatives?
Right.
Or was I just kind of talking to the same people who already agree with me?
I think that's a question a lot of people struggle with.
Absolutely.
Particularly if they're in, media or politics.
For sure. And this wasn't a sudden decision, right?
No, it seems like he really thought about it.
Yeah, he spent a lot of time thinking about how effective he was being, how he was communicating.
Definitely. And his take on the media is important here.
Yeah.
He talks about echo chambers,
Yeah.
Everyone's just stuck in their own little bubble, hearing the same stuff.
Right.
And it creates this us versus them feeling.
Right.
And even though a lot of people talk about this, it hits different coming from him.
Right.
Because he's been inside that media world for so long.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that whole echo chamber thing?
It seems like he recognized he was reaching a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe not the ones who disagreed with him the most.
Right, the ones he needed to reach.
And it makes you wonder if the way media is set up is kind of creating these bubbles without meaning to.
Yeah, interesting thought.
And I think it's really interesting how he reacts to that whole us versus them thing, He stresses that we all want the same basic stuff. A good life for our families, safety, health, happiness, opportunity.
Yeah.
Like maybe the differences aren't as deep as they seem.
It's a good point.
So his solution is pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
He wants to offer himself up, that's his phrase, to conservative news outlets.
Wow.
After being so connected to MSNBC.
That's a big change.
It shows he's really committed to bridging that divide.
Yeah, and it wasn't just a random thought.
No.
He specifically talks about seeing Pete Buttigieg and Eric Swalwell, both Democrats, going on right-leaning shows.
Right.
And it gave him ideas, It showed him how this cross-partisan thing could work.
Absolutely. But there was the contract with MSNBC.
Yeah.
He couldn't just walk away.
Of course.
It's interesting that he describes MSNBC's response as gracious and supportive when he asked to be let go.
Mm-hmm.
They agreed, but with a condition.
Mm-hmm.
He can't be a legal analyst for another network for 6 months.
Yeah.
That seems pretty fair.
I think so.
What do you think that says about MSNBC?
Well, maybe they get what he wants to do, even if it means he's not with them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that 6-month thing probably protects them,
Right.
They invested in him. He's part of their brand.
For sure.
But they're still giving him the freedom he's looking for.
It's a balance.
It is.
Now, he doesn't go all out attacking mainstream media,
Right.
but he does make some criticisms, especially about how the 2024 campaign is being covered.
Yeah.
They're treating it like a normal election cycle. And he's like, hold on.
Right.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, what stood out to you?
Well, his main concern is that Donald Trump is a convicted felon.
Mm-hmm.
And he even calls him an adjudicated insurrectionist.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the Supreme Court didn't uphold that Colorado ruling.
Right, about him being on the ballot.
But they didn't disagree with the findings about the insurrection, right?
Yeah, that's important to remember.
And of course, there's January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
Kirshner's point is, this isn't a normal situation.
It's not business as usual.
And he uses Trump's Davos speech as an example.
Oh,
He
yeah.
says it was full of lies, half-truths, and insults.
It was pretty outrageous.
And some networks just aired it, no interruptions, no fact-checking.
Yeah,
And that's what bothers him.
for sure.
He thinks it's damaging to our democracy.
Yeah.
And he says it goes against responsible journalism.
I mean, it raises a big question, right?
About how much responsibility the media has.
Absolutely.
When they're giving a platform to someone who might be unreliable.
You have to find a balance.
Right, between showing different viewpoints and making sure what people are hearing is accurate.
So his response is to go completely independent.
Wow.
With his writing, his commentary, his YouTube channel, Justice Matters. He even started a Substack, glennkirshner.substack.com.
Yeah.
And he's made it clear that nothing there is behind a paywall.
That's interesting.
Why do you think that is?
I think it shows what he cares about.
Yeah.
He wants as many people as possible to see his work.
Right.
So he's not charging anything.
Yeah.
It fits with his goal of reaching a bigger audience, even people who wouldn't normally subscribe to something like that.
Absolutely. And it's not like he's completely ditching mainstream media.
Oh.
He says he'll still go on different shows, left, right, or center.
Oh, wow.
But he won't be paid. He'll be an independent voice.
I see.
Focused on the rule of law.
It's a smart strategy, right?
He can still have a voice, but on his own terms.
Exactly. And he ends by really encouraging people to get involved.
Yeah.
He wants thoughts, suggestions, feedback through his website, glennkirshner.com. And he says he reads every message himself.
Really?
That seems intentional, right?
I think so.
Like he wants that direct connection with people.
It goes beyond just broadcasting, it's more like a conversation.
And maybe that helps break down those echo chambers.
Right.
He finishes with a really powerful line. We will all remain in this mess together. And he says, that's how we'll win this battle for the rule of law and for a healthy democracy.
That's a call to action.
It is. It really brings it all together.
And it emphasizes that the stuff he's talking about, it's bigger than just politics.
Exactly.
It's about basic principles that we all need to be committed to.
So the main takeaways here seem to be that Kirshner leaving MSNBC wasn't just a career move. It was something more.
It was deeper than that.
He's worried about how the media is working. He wants to break out of these echo chambers. He wants to be independent and have these conversations with people from all sides,
Yeah, focusing on the rule of law.
And he's trying to connect with a wider range of people and change how we talk about these things.
I hope this deep dive gave you a good understanding of why Kirshner made this decision.
Yeah.
It's clear he wants to do things his own way and reach a bigger audience.
So here's something to think about.
Okay.
Now that Kirshner's going independent, and with all the concerns he has about the media, what do you think the role of independent voices is going to be in helping people understand these really important legal and political issues?
That's a great question.
And how can people like you and me actively look for different perspectives, even ones that we might not agree with?
It's so important.
In this media world that's always changing.
Absolutely.
That's something for everyone to think about.
For sure.
Thanks for joining me for this deep dive. I hope you found it insightful.
It was great talking to you.
Always a pleasure. And to all our listeners out there, we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.